Compassion, we've heard the word used a lot. Be compassionate. In Buddhism, compassion is a major tenet. But what does it really mean? Is it different than empathy? And the answer is yes. It's very different from empathy. But empathy is folded into compassion. So if we think about empathy, empathy is the ability to feel somebody else, their pain, their suffering, their joy. You can feel it. It's a wonderful ability to have. It's a hardwired ability we have when we're born with it. And how is that different than compassion? Well, I'll answer that. Compassion is empathy with work boots on, meaning that compassion is not about feeling, it's about doing. So there is an action component to compassion. Without that action component, it's empathy. Nothing wrong with empathy. It's a wonderful way we can connect with one another. But compassion, that doing is how we connect. That doing is how we are informed that we're not alone, that we're part of an overall ecosystem, a community, that we're loved. So, in essence, what I could say is compassion is loving kindness in action. And that's why the Buddhists talk about that, the relief of suffering, and how you relieve suffering by loving kindness. And that's all sort of under the umbrella of compassion. So I asked my friend Daryl, and Randall knows Daryl, what, do you have an example of compassion? He said, oh, sure. I was over at my niece's house and they have a 8-month-old baby, and the baby started to cry. And everyone there was sort of jumped up to kind of help out with the cry of the baby. It was like an instinctual response. And we talked about that. And he said, yeah, it's really sort of hardwired. When we see suffering, we want to do something about it. We want to reach out with our hands or our thoughts or whatever, but we want to do something. And I thought, yeah, that's it. That really is that's it. It's something of the heart, it seems, where we're given to step in a way out of our comfort zone. It could be dangerous. Um, if you were to help somebody, and I can have an example of it. I was coming back from San Luis Obispo, college, college break, Christmas time. It's cold out. It's about 10 o'clock at night, and I'm on the freeway about 2 miles out of town. And here's this guy hitchhiking with a small backpack, and it's about 42 degrees and the wind is blowing. I'm going, what's this guy doing out there? As I look at him and I watch and I drive by him, and I go, wait a minute. And I put on the brakes. And it wasn't a conscious thing. It was something about recognizing this man's in danger. He's not dressed warm enough for this. Where's he going to spend the night? If somebody doesn't pick him up, who will? And nobody's picking him up, and there's not many cars on the road. So I stopped. None of that was in my mind. I'm just saying that there was something that put the foot on the brake and it turned over. And it's easy to kind of rationalize it afterwards, but there was this upwelling of concern and wanting to do something about it. He runs up, opens the door, climbs in, he's shivering, and I know immediately, I can feel I have done the right thing here. And immediately there was kind of this full circle of understanding of thank you, I get it. You know, it's like this. Basically, it's an exchange of love in a way, you know, back and forth. He's very appreciative. He looks at the crackers I have on the dash. helps himself. And so we're now driving along, and he tells me he's from France and he's touring the United States with his thumb. and and I'm going, wow. And so we talk for the next 4 hours, and then we get now it's up to Oakland, and it's like, well, now what do I do with this guy? I can't just drop him off. So I take him home, and he stays for 3 days. So this is I bring this out to where compassion isn't necessarily a mental thing. It's something of the heart that pulls us. Boom. And we can either go with the pull of the heart, or we can stop it and say, oh no, it's too dangerous. I don't have time. I have all my reasons why I won't stop, or help the homeless person, or get involved with this activity or this movement. We have our reasons, and they can be wonderfully great reasons. But as we listen to the heart, can the heart override some of those reasons? And that's where the curiosity comes in. Do we immediately listen to our, nope, it's not yours to do? Or do we become curious and say, well, maybe it is mine? And just that questioning, maybe it's mine, maybe that's something for me to do. And we never know unless we actually do the next step. We can always retreat, but what if we were to do the next step and to actually engage? So this bit about true compassion, what is that about? And if I look at it, I am not going to identify with the circumstance. I know this is going to get a little heady. I'm not going to identify with the circumstance. I'm going to identify with the suffering of the person. And what that means is someone could lose a loved one. And I could get very hooked up that I just lost my father, and I'm really upset. And now I am really engaged with this person because of my upset, as opposed to being a witness to their upset. And when I started working in hospice, that was part of our training, was to make sure that we had grieved for all of the people that we had lost, so that we could be a witnessing presence for the people in their loss. So again, it's really about holding the space and holding the hand for somebody in suffering, rather than trying to fix it and make it better or to spiritually bypass it, but it's to be present to the suffering. We will all go through suffering. And it's really up to us as to how skillfully we will go through our own suffering, because we will go through suffering. And there's a couple things, 3 words for us to remember. And that is the skillfulness of this, the curiosity. And the third one is to hold the whole situation lightly, as children hold it lightly. It's not a heavy burden. If it's heavy, there's too much involvement. So it's skillful, holding it lightly, and being curious. So now how does that apply? Let's say you see somebody, or let's say you see yourself in suffering, something you've gotten really bad news, and you're devastated. And this is, oh no. And we start to go into maybe a spiral of worrying about what's going to happen later, what's going to happen in the future. And this is really a concern. It could be a concern for your own health, for your family or situations, economy, um, the presidential elections coming up. There's plenty of things to be concerned about. But can we be skillful in terms of looking what's happening? Why am I, this is the self-compassion piece. Why am I so upset? And being curious with that. What is being triggered in me? And can I be skillful with myself, and can I hold it lightly? And that's what we're up to. It's like, how do I move forward when I feel paralyzed in fear, or feel groundless? I feel so empty and disconnected. I need somebody to lean on. I need to hold a hand. I need something, and I don't even know I need that. And that's what happens as we become so, at least I have become so closed down, I don't even know I need a hand. And in those times, can I still remain curious as to what's going on within me? Can I take a look at what is it that could be helpful? Because left to my own devices, I can go round and round and round and ruminate on the bad possibilities and neglect what's actually working in my life. So I can move from despair and suffering into gratitude for what I do have. That's kind of the skillful means piece. How do I flip it from the glass half full to the glass is, I guess I said that wrong, the glass half empty to the glass half full. It's the same amount of water, but it's a different perspective. How do I switch that perspective? And it's possible to do. Again, that's the skillful means. That's remaining curious what's going on. And the last piece is, again, how do I hold it lightly? Simply lightly. And that's one of the toughest pieces. In my hospice work, I saw a lot of suffering. And it wasn't necessarily the pain of dying, it was all of the thoughts around that and all of the confusion around that. And when I would invite people to come present, what's alive and moving and real in your life right in this moment? And when they became present to what's happening right now, what's happening in your body, what's happening in your thoughts, what's happening, and all of a sudden that sort of involves a different part of brain, that involves the witness consciousness, that involves getting out of the mind that wants to terrorize us at times, getting into the witness mind. Call it our divine mind, that part of us that is connected through the heart to the infinite, to the beloved. And in a way, I would invite them to tune in to what is alive and present within you right now. And I would ask, are you okay in this moment? Are you okay in this moment? And everybody invariably would say, yes. In this moment, I said, if you go to the future, what could happen? Well, it's going to be, and all of the fear comes up when we think of the future. So one of the ways in terms of compassion is if you can bring people, if you're being compassionate with, bring them into the present. What's alive now? What's moving now? What are the sensations of this moment, as opposed to thinking and going into thoughts and going into the future? Can you slow it down and bring it to right now? because invariably right now comes the next breath, the next heartbeat, and that we're okay. Consciousness is still here. So I'm going to tell this last story. And this is a story of an American martial arts expert, and he was on a train in Tokyo. And this is a story that Ram Dass tells many times. And so he's on the train, and he notices this drunk comes on the train, big burly guy, just big beard, unshaven. You're just nasty, he's smelly, and he's really reeks of alcohol, and he's roughing up people as he's walking down the aisle. He's being belligerent, and he's terrorizing the whole car. And the martial arts guy, he's going, he can feel and be very compassionate for all the people in the car because they're terrified, and he can feel their suffering and their pain, and he wants to help them out. He wants to take this guy down, and he's just about ready to do this. So he's recognizing that there's danger in here, but he can handle himself, and so he's moving forward. And as he moves forward to start engaging the drunk, this little old man with the big glasses pops up and says to the drunk, "Hey, fellow, what you been drinking?" And it stops the guy. Skillful means here. Stops the guy. "I've been drinking sake." "Oh, I love sake. Me and the wife every evening sit out in the backyard and we have a cup of sake and we look at the plum tree, which is blooming right now. It's beautiful. Here, come sit down. Tell me what you've been up to." So he does. The drunk sits down, and within 3 or 4 minutes, the drunk is sobbing, telling him his life story of how his wife left him. His kids won't talk to him. He's a drunk. He's worthless, and his life is over. And the old man is saying, "Ah, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it at all. I think there's a lot more to you than what you think. Why don't you come home and I want you to meet my wife. She's very special. We'll cook you a meal. Would you like that?" "Oh, yeah, I'd like that a lot." And so I tell the story because it demonstrates so much. There was a dangerous situation. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And he exhibited a beautiful way of skillfully diffusing the situation, showing amazing, not only empathy, but compassion for this man in his circumstance. And he went out of his way. He didn't have to, but he went out of his way to help this man. And it may have helped his, saved his life in some way by this amount of loving kindness. And that's what it was. It wasn't just loving kindness. So that the drunk did not feel disconnected. He felt seen, he felt heard, and the old man didn't try to fix him. There was no fixing involved, but there was a listening, and there was a loving kindness connection. And isn't that what we need? Not only with one another, not only within community, but most of all, that loving kindness connection with ourselves. And that's the toughest one. I know I beat myself up for not being better, for not doing more, for not this and for not that. And so I leave you with, can I be skillful with myself? Can we be skillful with ourselves? Can we remain curious with ourselves in terms of being kind to ourselves, let alone loving ourselves, but just to be kind to ourselves? And lastly, can we hold the whole situation lightly? Just to hold it lightly. And you know what that feels like. You know, when you don't pet a cat heavily, you pet a cat lightly, that light touch. And that light touch feels good. It feels good to the cat and it feels good to you. So think about holding yourself like you would pet a cat, just so lightly and so gently. And with that, let's take this into prayer. As we say, simply take a breath together and listen to the moments and the sounds of now. This blessed moment, this precious moment. And as we settle into our bodies, feeling our bodies freshly in this moment. And perhaps as I'm talking, you can find your heartbeat. And as you're listening to the joyful sounds, feeling the breath as it supports us. And so, can we have more compassion for all living things? Are we able to reduce suffering just by our presence, just by our own loving kindness to ourselves and to others? And so I anchor that possibility to bring it forth as a new reality that we can move forward in a greater degree of compassion for everything, and especially ourselves. When we take a breath and we feel that moving through us, compassion and understanding for this body that works so well, even when we don't think it does, it's doing so much powerful good. We take another breath. And we simply thank all of our organs and our lungs and our heart. We take a last breath and we simply release it, saying, "Blessed be," and so it is.